Okay, hello, welcome back. So, I finally figured out how to get OBS off my screen. Well, I guess I wouldn't say I finally figured out. I decided to look into it to see if it was in there. Found it. Now I don't have to close down OBS real quick when I start the screen. Anyway, so now this is part three. This might be a little bit of a longer video. Not sure how long I will make it go. Try to be less stream of consciousness and more kind of focusing in on creating a tool that might be useful. I've given myself a bit of a challenge on this one. Not myself, but I've given this one a challenge aspect to it because I wanted to create something where you have to think a little bit, put your decision hat on, and try to figure out how to do things a little differently. So, what I've created here is I formatted a bunch of cells. So, I'll go over what it does and then how it works. So, this is a painting. I could put a little here. I'll just put right here painting and I'll make it like I'll just merge a bunch of these cells together. Over here, merge. I'll go center. I'll make it big, and it'll say painting. Let's see, painting estimator. And the whole purpose of it is, let's say I'm a paint contractor. I'm gonna go paint your house. I go out to your house and I start measuring walls, figure out what the height of your walls are, and then I just start measuring lengths. And you want the interior of your house painted. This particular tool will allow me to give you an estimate that looks fairly professional. So I go out there and I estimate the interior walls and how many square feet I'm going to need to paint. And then I come back here and I print out this thing here. In fact, let me use my macro that I've created just to make it easier on this for the purposes of showing. So we'll create this PDF that I can either print to my printer and give you a paper copy, or I can email you that. I might actually change these to go ahead and go like to the top. Pow. Yeah, that looks cool. Okay, anyway, neither here nor there. Stuff we can talk about later. But I've allowed myself some edits to make in here too, so I can also show you that I didn't just copy this stuff from somewhere else. I did, however, go to Sherwin-Williams, and there's plenty of other paint contractors out there, but I did just grab like a PDF, and this particular set of data is only a page, is off of one page of their catalog. I think it's off their internet, but I just wanted to have mainly exterior and interior. I didn't so much care about the miscellaneous, but that's what I was after. And so I just copied that information. So I got the, this thing's being weird. I got the product name, I got the application for exterior, interior, a sales number, which could potentially be used to order the paint if you needed to. Uh, the quantity that it sells in, gallons or quarts, I think, are the only two options on this particular sheet. We could put 5 gallon in there too, but right now it's gallon and quart, and then the price. And this is what I guess is the. I'm guessing this is the price for. I went to the contractors one, so I don't know if this is the contractor pricing. And I know how these companies like to save their pricing for special pricing for contractors. So Gene's Painting Company might get a slightly different price than, let's say, Home Depot if they were painting houses because of the amount of purchase power they have, etc. So I just took that as an example. It doesn't have to be real data for this, but I assume that you would be using real data if you were doing this tool for yourself. If it were real data, the price would be whatever it is. But this is what I got. So the goal here was then to take this data, utilize it to potentially enter in. I think I missed something here. I'm gonna have to add a little bit of something in here, which I can certainly do. Like I said, there was a bit of room for fixing and stuff. Uh, but once you determine what the amount of square feet is, you also have to determine. And I know walls are like, I mean, 8 feet is an average, I think, but uh, you might want to be more accurate and do less. But we're gonna assume for this particular tool, just tutorial, that the walls in the interior walls were 8 feet. If it were an exterior, obviously you'd want to multiply that by whatever the highest wall was, and then for your triangle spaces, if you wanted to, you could just multiply the length times the height and then cut it in half, because that's usually about what a triangle is, about half the area of a rectangle. Anyway, so blah blah blah. Long story short, what I've got here is a place to put some information specifically related to the job itself. Um, and this is just fake data, you know. It's not anything real. Email. Oops. I got to go back and like. There's a way that you can make it easy to tab through these fields, but I'm not going to do that right now or on this tutorial. But anyway, the beauty of filling this out is it will populate to the sheet there, so that when you do make that printout for here, here I'll just show you where we're doing it, so we might as well. I run the macro, and now you can see on the estimate that it will have the address and the customer name and such. So that's what we're going to produce, and it's going to look like this when it's done. The customer will have some stuff to read. You might want to maybe even put some signatures lines in there, which we can certainly do, but this is just an estimate that you have in writing. You might put in here that it's good for 90 days, whatever your thing is. So I say, here's the estimate, and this estimate is good for 90 days. And you could use today's date to actually put an expiration for this in this area or something, whatever. But yeah, so here you go. Uh, I debated whether or not I would want to save the the jobs in this tool as, like, if you did a estimate for John Smith in Rhode Island, and then another one for Gene Simmons in Delaware or something, that you could come back into this tool and sort of use a lookup, which might be actually a pretty cool tutorial on another day. But instead, what this will do is it will save the estimate as the name of the thing with the estimate as a PDF. So it saves it right here in this file, and then I'll show you how that works. And at that point, it's just by the customer name and the estimate. We could even put a date in there to make that even better. But whatever the case is, it will save it here, so you don't. I don't feel the need right now to do the tutorial for putting the information in here and pulling it up like a customer management system. But anyway, let's look at the fields here. So I've got this little disclaimer thing because there's this miscellaneous cost thing. So uh, this is really for the estimator. It should be kind of intuitive to know that when you do a job of this kind, you're going to have tools, you're going to have labor, you're going to have odds and ends kinds of things. You might have to have a special type of tool to reach a certain point in a house. You might need a special kind of tape because of some sort of finish on a trim or something. I don't know the ins and outs of a painting business. I've never owned one, but any kind of special considerations that wouldn't be common to every job might be included in this, and so you would have a separate write-in place for that to just put in odds and ends numbers. That's what this is. And then our job type, we're going to either do interior, exterior, or the whole house, as it is here. Now, it's one or the other. So if you're going to do both interior and exterior, you'll want to check the box, because ultimately the last part of this will say the paintings for the interior and exterior of the home. If you were to choose the exterior, then it updates this to actually just say the exterior of the home, and that's the formula that it takes. But anyway, so that's what we're doing with that. And then this number is designed to be your square footage calculation. Now I'm doing square foot, so in this case I didn't do any special math where I multiplied 10 by 18, 100 by 18 to get 1800. To me, it's like, take 1800 divided by 8, and that's how much length of wall they have, essentially, is what I was doing. So we could potentially put a place in here where you enter the height of the wall. Height. I hate it when other people do that. Height. It doesn't have an H at the end of it. Height. You can measure the height of the wall and enter that in here, and then you just have to do like a aggregate of all your lengths for each wall. But I just said, all right, I'm gonna assume that the guy at the house did all the lengths, multiply it by the height, and put the number in here. So that's what these numbers are. And be the square footage that you need to cover. And then I made a drop down of the list from this sheet of data that you can use to choose different types of paint. And so this will end up populating these places too. This number is low, so I know there's a problem in my formula. I'll figure it out. We'll get to it here in a minute. But for right now, this is how it works. You put the numbers in here, how many gallons of paint are going to be. This is actually going to be determined. This is a formulaically determined. If you ever want to know what your formula is referencing, you can highlight the cell, double click into it, and you'll notice this blue highlight here or this red highlight here. And if you have multiples, then the highlights will be different colors for each one. But they refer to the value that it's referring here. So this pink one is AE14, the blue one is X14, and so on and so forth. So that's why it does that. And so you know, okay, I'm referencing this cell and that cell. And what this cell is doing is, again, it's rounding up. And again, I think I talked about this briefly at the end of my last video, but if you're going to paint a house, you're going to buy gallons of paint in quantities that they're existing quantities, and they're finite. They're not customizable. You don't get 1.8 gallons from a company. You know, you either buy 1 gallon or you buy none. And so in this case, when we get to this number, this 12 that comes up here, it's 12 because the actual number is something like 11 point whatever. Doesn't matter. If there's anything above 0.0, then, or 0.00 rather. In fact, in this case, if the calculation for some reason is going to be over 0 in any place past the decimal, it'll bounce it up to the next gallon, because you're essentially buying a gallon to cover that last portion of a gallon that might be included. So 12 is how many gallons you're going to purchase, how many it's going to take to cover. And if you look here, what we're doing is we're summing up the square footage here of these two cells, 1800 and 2200, and then we're dividing it by 350, because for every gallon of paint, it should cover. Now, Sherwin-Williams says 350 to 400, or at least the internet. I can't remember if I asked Sherwin-Williams or just Google says it's 350 to 400 feet per gallon. So for every gallon you get, you're going to be able to cover 1 square feet. So if I divide this by 350, then that's how many gallons is going to cover 4,000 square feet, is 12. And that's, if you were to multiply 12 times 350, then you should arrive at 4,000. So that's what that is. And then here's our hours. So we're going to estimate. A good painting company will know how long it takes to paint a house. It might take 2 days worth, like come in, do the prep work one day, and the second day blast out the paint and then take everything down and they're gone. Whatever the case is, here's your hourly pay. And I decided to make the rate of pay a formula, which then can be found on sheet 1. That's my labor rate, and this is my profit margin. And that profit margin is used in this formula to generate a total. So I'll go over the formula and what it does and how it works. But that's what we're looking at. And after you enter all of this stuff in here, and we can always go ahead and go back through this, and we can edit. Let me make one quick edit here. This estimate, I'm just going to put this here. Estimate is for, and it's going to, here's a cool thing. If you're going to do, here, let me go up here. If you're going to, you can use formulas and text inside of a cell. If you didn't know that, how you do that is you always start with equals. The equal sign for Excel is going to tell Excel that you're going to have some sort of calculation, some sort of calculated value in this cell along with text. You don't have to put text in there, but the equal sign prepares the cell to be ready to parse any functions that you put in. Any formulas or functions will be ready. If you don't put the equal sign in there and you put the name of or even use a function, it simply won't work. So you have to start with the equal sign. And then text has to be wrapped in quotes. Like if you're a programmer, string values are usually in quotes. So in this case, you got to put the quotes. You got to put these quotes in there. And anytime you want to throw a formula in there to populate values inside of your sentence to update your sentence to be meaningful, you have to use quotes and the ampersand. So I'll show you what I mean. So I said this estimate is for, and then I stopped. So I'm going to put quotes right there. I'm actually going to put my space inside here so I don't have to think about that with my formula. And now that I have that quoted off there, I'm going to use the ampersand. And what this is a concatenator. Concatenation is adding, like if you were to add words to a sentence, that would be called concatenation. But we use it in computer terminology to say I want to concatenate things together to make one consistent string of values. But I might need to use literal text, or I might also need to use calculated values. And so that's why we do this with the ampersand, is to let Excel know that anything in quotes is going to be actual literal text, and anything between these ampersands will be calculated values. And so what I want to do is I want to sum up the square footage, right? So I want to go sum, and I've already got my equal sign, so I don't have to do anything. I don't have to put equals in front of the formula because it's already here in the beginning of the cell. But what I basically want to do is I want to sum two values, right? And then I want to go back here and I want to add my quotes. So all my quotes are in place. The next thing I have to do is just sum two values, because I want to say that this estimate is for X amount of square feet, so that we know if that changes, we can change the bid, and that's fine. So I'm going to sum these two values. The sum formula takes comma separated values, and just like that, should be, oh, I already have my quotation, I already have my parentheses. So I should be able to just hit enter. And the one thing I want to do from there, of course, is square feet. I want to put a space and go square feet like that. I'll just do caps, that's fine, I don't care. And so now you've got a sentence that will update if I change my square footage. Not only does it change the estimate and the gallons, as you can see, it will also change it here. So it's updating everything as it goes. I do want to recommend in most cases for you to use formulas for things like this, because formulas, and protect your formulas so that nobody can delete them, but formulas will update across multiple, even workbooks and worksheets, if they're all related to each other, if they reference each other. And so can be very important to do that. And also, you don't want to come in here and type this out every single time when values change. If you use a formula to populate for values that change, then you don't have to come in here and change it. You can be, obviously you want to test it, but once you've tested that the values work, you don't want to be, coming in here and making those edits manually every time. So that's how we would do that. So all in all, and then I like to, when I have a long formula, I like to bust this window down because it makes it easier to read. But for now, let's tuck that in. Cool. So our painting estimator will take the customer's information. It will allow us to choose what kind of job, and then it will give us a square foot and allow us to choose the paint. So what this formula does, again, it rounds up. It takes the sum of those two, the whole square footage, and divides by 350. It rounds it with 0 decimals. If you don't, then what happens is when you round, it will give you decimals if you want. Okay, so that's the actual value up to 5 places past that. So you don't want that. You want to round up with 0 decimals, and that'll give you your full gallons of paint. And when we're talking about units of measure like this, we're talking about discrete values. If you don't know what a discrete value means in math, it means values like 1, 2, 3. There is no in between. It's just specific values. Granted, discrete values don't usually include decimals, but could possibly use those. But there just is no in between values. So discrete values typically refers to values like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So that way you don't have any decimals in there. So that's what we're doing here. This one is very simple. I'm just putting the amount of hours, and then this formula just pulls from this sheet over here. I'm going to recommend giving sheets uh, meaningful names. So you might go profit data or pricing data. Let's just call it pricing. Well, let's call it cost data. Actually, it is cost, but let's call it like cost profit data. Yeah, just for fun. And you can see how that will update over here now. And then that way you can also, again, we talk about this too, you can go in here and give these names, and this can be labor rate. And the beauty of giving that a name is that now this can just be labor rate. So if we come in here, it'll still refer to that, but you can say equals labor rate, whoops, and it will also give you the same value. And then it's easy. And of course, if you decide to update that labor rate, of course, you can. And you can change that. It actually isn't really that important. The value, this value doesn't actually get calculated. It just gets placed into the cell. So if you actually change this and wiped out the formula in favor of the rate that you want to choose, that would be fine. If you didn't save it, the next time you open it, the formula would be back. But then again, if you're just going to use this for a manual entry, just putting a number in there will suffice. And at any point you want to put the formula back in there, you can just choose equals labor rate, and it'll just put it back in there for you. So it's really, it's kind of up to you. Whoops, it didn't go right. There we go. Okay, so that value is kind of arbitrary. You could do it either way. I like to use sheets like this just because then there's a place where you can go to edit values that may change fairly often. You might want to change your profit margin depending on the market. And so it's easier just to have a table of things like that that you can change that then filter to all the rest of your day. Because it like let's say you have a sheet like this, but you have four of them, four different ones that work on their own values. If you have them in a table like that, then changing them in one place will filter to all of those sheets. But if you hard code it into that sheet, you have to go in and change it for every single sheet that it exists on. And that can be cumbersome. So this one is just kind of a best practice when it comes to don't repeat yourself. It makes it a ton easier to edit. I find this example of how that would really play out in the world of technology is if you're creating a website, a lot of times you'll have a website with multiple pages, but you want the same header on every website. In the days of, well, I started learning HTML when the internet was kind of new, interestingly. And at one point in time, it was really uh, the only way you could really create a website was to basically generate every individual page by itself and link them with href links until scripting languages made it easier to make that dynamic where you could code the header in one place and populate it to every single page automatically. That way, every time you click on a page, you get the same experience for the header. You got the same navigation, the same logo is always there, etc., etc. But you don't have to code it on every single page. And more importantly, you don't have to change. If I have 30 different pages that I have to fix, I have to go in there and change 30 different headers. Whereas if I just have one header that populates with a dynamic reference, then I can change it in one place and it automatically filters to everything else. So all my pages have a header, but instead of spending a half hour or an hour fixing it, it took me one change, 3 minutes. I logged in, I logged out, I went to lunch. Anyway, so that's why you do that. All right. So I got all my data. I got some formulas working. I noticed an issue with this. Now this just might be a formula issue on this page because I'm pretty sure, well, no, if I add up 1680 and 247, I'm going to get to about 1950, right? So it's going to be 1827. Oh, interesting. Yeah, 1827. Huh. Okay. So I think this formula is wrong. Let's see what we're doing. I put the dollar sign out here. Let me get rid of the dollar sign real quick. I'll just make that formatting. So I'm rounding and I'm using an index. So we might as well get into what index does if you're not sure what index does. Index match is a very common combination of Excel formulas and functions that makes, I should be clear, this is a function and this is a formula. This is more of a formula because it has some functions in it as well as text, and it makes something happen. This is just kind of a function where you're just pulling in data from other parts of the sheet. And so what we're doing here is we'll start on the inside because this is obviously rounding up a bunch of stuff. So the index, what does it do? So the index, if you click on it here, click into the form, if you actually click past the parenthesis for the function, it gives you kind of a reference on what to do. So you've got your index, takes an array, takes a row number, takes a column number. Another version, this would be what you might call an override. Overload. No, this is an override. It is index, it's reference, row number, column number, and area number. I'm not familiar with that one. I could look it up, but what this one basically says to you is the first value of your index formula is going to be the array that you're going to look into. The row number is going to literally be the row number, and the column number is going to be an offset, meaning if I'm going to search from A to Z on my sheet, from column A to Z, then I need to decide which of those columns I want to return. I'm going to be more detailed. I'm just giving a very basic description of it. But I'm just going to be returning the column offset from the first column that I'm choosing. So that's what the column number is. So that's the index. And then you can see here that I'm indexing the Sherwin-Williams page, sheet. You can tell because there's an exclamation afterward. So the sheet that says Sherwin-Williams, sorry. It's probably, is that right? Sherwin? Yeah, anyway. And then the reference on the Sherwin-Williams page is from A2 to E53. So that is my array. And that means that when I say index in that, I'm choosing all of these values right here. I'm going to get out of this. I'll change my formula. So I said I'm going to choose A2 to A53. And so all of these values are what I'm going to be looking into. And the reason that you have to highlight all of these is because you're indexing this group of data and you want to grab one cell from one of these columns. You want to grab one row from one column, like right here. But in order to do that, you need to make sure that your index highlights the first cell because that's going to be what your offset references from. And then you can use Control and Shift to go all the way to where the last value is and down. Same thing. Control Shift and arrow keys will give you that effect that I just showed you. And so I'm indexing all of this because A is going to be my first column and E is going to be my last column. And what I can do is I need to know which row I'm looking for, right? So if I know I'm going to use the same exact paint for every job that I do, then I can use a hard-coded value in my match. Instead of using a match function, I can just use my hard value. So when we look at our formula for this particular situation, what we're seeing is which one was I using? Oh yeah, it was on this sheet here. We're going to fix this one. So what you're seeing is here is I'm indexing. I showed you what the table I was indexing. And then match, your second value is your row number. So you can use the match function to get the row number that you're going to want, or you can use a hard value. So the row number, if I'm looking at this, is going to be one of these rows, right? It might be row number 9. Now if I'm going to use Loxon XP Masonry Coating on every single job, then in this formula, I can just use 9 instead of all of this. But I don't know what, I have plenty of options for this particular match, right? So what I'm telling the index is I want you Let me go back to that real quick so that we know exactly what we're doing. I want you to find a value in this particular set of data right here. And I want to get the row that says, maybe I want to do row 33. So I want to find my paint being Promar 200 interior latex EG shell, this guy. So that's the value I'm looking for. I don't know what that value is going to be because on my next job I may very well want to use WB epoxy catalyst, or I might want to use Harmony IAQ interior flat latex. So how would I come up with a way to know which row number I'm looking for if I don't know exactly what that is? Also, if I know exactly what I'm looking for, how would I do that? And so here, I'll give you an example. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back. I'll hit escape. Once you go into a cell, you want to hit escape. I'm going to go back here to this, and I'm going to wipe out this match function right here. And I'm just going to put in parentheses that value I just copied. And that will tell the index function that I'm looking for that specific value. Index Sherwin-Williams Harmony Interior Latex 5. Okay. Wait a minute here. What's the problem? Let me see if it isn't 4. Row number, column number. There's my array. Row number, column number. Oh, that's right. I'd have to match that. Sorry. So I'm just going to say column number. Oh. You know what? I don't know. I'm always using match. Let's see what it is. I'm going to highlight that and choose that right there. Okay. So that's telling me Sherwin is okay 4, and then I'm offsetting it. All right, I have to copy this to know exactly what it's doing. Apparently, my brain doesn't want to work today. So I will hit equals. I'll put that in there. Get rid of that parenthesis right there. And index Sherwin 5053. I'm gonna put row number 33. Okay, Promar, and I want to do 5. Let's see. Okay, 22. Okay, $20.22. So this is what we're trying to do with the index. We're saying I want to find the value in this array where this particular thing matches something. So I said row 33. In this case, it says row, whoops, it says row 33 in my column, but I think that's because I have this in a table. And so row 33 is actually 34 in the table. But if I didn't have set this up as a table, then it would be row 33. And so the first row is eaten up by headers, and that's why I got 33. So 33, row 33. Now the offset, this is where it gets tricky. See, this is the value I was looking for, right? Or that's the value I got, 20.2, which is this value right here. So what index is saying is, in this group of data, all this stuff here, find the value in the first column is where it's going to look for. Or whatever, so if you select here, then that's the first column. So whatever first column you selected, it's either going to look for the row that you provided or the match function that we'll get back to will find the value in the first column. It'll find that value. And then it'll say, return the value that's offset by 5 columns from this first one. That's what we said over here in this. I keep doing Control Alt Tab. This value here is how far to offset it from the first column. So when we look at that, it's here, it's 1, I go, and then this is the tricky part. This is 1. So I'm returning column 1 would return this value. This column 2, because this is the second column, that would return interior if we said 2. And if I said 3, it would return that value. If I said 4, it would return that. I said 5, it would return that. So if I go back over here to this sheet and put 4 in there, we should see the word gallon pop up. And that is how the index works. Now, this 33 value, however, can be found differently if you don't know what that row is going to be. If all you know is that you want this value, then in this very cell, to be from the offset, the 5th column over from that data set, based on the paint that you're going to choose, then you have to use a match formula and a drop down like I was showing you on the other page. So let me go back to that. We got this drop down. So this drop down again is just a list of values pulled from that paint value on the Sherwin-Williams sheet. So whatever is put in here is going to feed into the match function that I had set up in here. Okay, so let's go over the match function now. And then I'll explain that one again, and that should cover index and match. So this is the entirety of the index function. Index the Sherwin-Williams sheet from A2 to E53. You're going to find this value in this match thing in the first column, and then you're going to return the value from the first column of that particular data. What am I trying to match? Well, the match one here, as you can see, when you get inside of the parentheses, it gives you the hints on what to do. So the match function will have a lookup value, a lookup array, and a match type. So I'm going to go over the match type first. There's 2 types of matches in a match function. And I think there's even 3 values that you can use. But I think the third one is -1, and I think it's unuseful in this case because you want a specific value to be returned. And we're going to be looking for, because we're going to use that particular column of values, then we want what we would call an exact match. So if I'm mistaken about the 3, there's at least the exact match and the approximate match. And you would want to use an exact match in this case because it's pulled from the table, so it's going to exactly match that value. So it's going to be a perfect match when it finds the paint name that you're looking for. So that's what that lookup, that match type is. And 1 means approximate for some reason, and 0 is exact. So when we put a 0 in here in a minute, just know that that means that there's, like, I think it might mean 0 room for error or something like that. My guess is that it probably returns some sort of modulo value. I don't even know how it works. I guess I could look it up, but I don't care that much. But essentially, it'll return. Maybe it's even true or false. Like true is, but true is usually 1, and false is 0. So I don't know. But 0 means exact match essentially. And then we're going to be looking up a lookup value, right? So our lookup value in this case is going to be this value right here in this cell. And it's that value because this is essentially the value that we're going to look up in that table. Now we need to know what our lookup array is. So for a match, we're just going to use the column. We're not going to use extra values because we're only going to be looking in this column for that value. So we're going to match this value in this column. And what that's going to do is it's going to return a value of whatever row this is in. That's how this works. It's going to return an exact match, which is what we're going to go comma 0. If it finds an exact match, okay, yep, see there's another value greater than, which we won't be using. So we're going to use an exact match, which is 0. That's why 1 is less than, -1 is greater than, 0 is, okay. See, it tells you right there. Excel is very handy that way. Very useful. So once we find an exact match, all this is going to be a number. That's what this match function returns. It's just a number. So essentially, this is going to return the row number. That's what it's going to return. So if that was found in row 33, then behind the scenes 33 is going to be plugged into this portion of the index function. Remember, because this is the row number of the index function. That's what we're using match for. Notice the parentheses here. That means that this is the match formula. And then this again, this value here is going to be 5 because we are looking in column 5 of this data for this index. So this whole thing for the index is basically saying, look in this whole table of data, and then I want you to find this value of paint in the first column. And then once you do that, tell me what row that is so I can take the value in the 5th column of that row. And that's what this will do. I also then included a little bit more info here. Is like this is a multiplication, obviously. So we're rounding, and then I'm going to take the value that I find in this column here, this row and column. So this will actually return one cell's worth of data. It'll be a value, a number that can be calculated or operated on. And then I'm multiplying it times 1 plus the cost profit value. Because if you're going to add, this is the shortcut way to add profit to something. Because if you have a 20% markup on something, if I just multiply this by 20%, then I'm going to be multiplying this value that comes back by 20%. And if that value is 100, then it's going to take this value multiplied by 20%, and that's going to be 20, and then it's going to multiply that by something, and I don't want that. If I have $100 and my markup is 20, then I actually want that to be 120. That's the number I want. And then I want to multiply that by how many gallons that I'm going to buy. So 120 times 12 would be what, 1440? And so that's what I'm trying to gather here by doing 1 times the profit margin. That's what this particular part of the cell is doing. Because remember, this profit data cell here, B2, is actually the profit of point. In this case, it's 0.22 for my tutorial. So I'm multiplying the cost of the gallon for 1 gallon of paint times 1.22 to get the actual profit margin, the actual amount of money that we're going to be charging the customer for this gallon of paint, basically. And then I'm going to multiply that by the number. This right here refers to the value. If we go back in here, I'll show you. It refers to this number right there, as you can see. So we are taking the value of the paint that we selected in our main sheet, and then we're multiplying it by the 1 plus the profit margin, so 1.22. And then in this case, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to round that to 0, so it should return a value. It should return a discrete value of like 1250. If it has decimals in it, it'll be 00. And then multiplying that by the value in AJ15. Okay. And so, what does that tell us? That tells us that if I were to just extract this piece right here from my formula, right? Just Control C that, hit escape, come over here where I already have a value, leave the equal sign in there. So this will be 22.1674. So then I want to take that and multiply it by 1 plus, whoops, I want to take that, multiply it by 1 plus, and I want to put this in parentheses or else it'll try to do the multiplication first. 1 plus this guy. So my price per gallon to the customer with my markup is 27. And then this one needs to be that times this amount over here. And it's 351.575. So why isn't that one? Let's see. This is that. Okay. I'm wondering if that times this is equaling that, and it's not doing the other thing. It's not even the case there. So if I were to round up, that would be more. 286. What is this doing? So it's matching the value I'm going to go ahead and make these absolute references just to be sure. Not that it would change it, but it might be referencing relative values instead. So let's just, doesn't hurt to do this. There are cases where you do not want to use absolute values, because if you're going to copy down your formula down a sheet and you want the columns and rows to update, you may not use absolute values. But if you're going to reference the same exact columns and rows every time, definitely want to use those values. Okay, so this one is taking the index, and I am essentially multiplying those together and then rounding it, so that's fine. And then rounding, maybe I want to, I'm going to take that out of there and round it to 0 here. Okay, I'm getting closer, but it's not giving me the cost. It's not giving me that. And it's not rounding up because I didn't choose to round up. I'm going to round up. Rounding up will definitely take you to the next dollar up if there's anything over 0.1 in the decimal side. Okay, so now I've got a round up. I think the problem is I may not be taking that on correctly. So that's giving me a value that times 1 plus the cost, 1 plus the profit. If I change this, would it make any difference? It's just not multiplying those two numbers for some reason. So let's figure that out. We're going to be troubleshooting here. So I know that it's returning the correct value because if I go look for Promar 400 0 interior latex flat, that's oh, here it is right here. So that's 1817. That's not correct, is it? What did I choose over here? Promar 400 0 interior latex flat. Cool. So, yeah, fun. Apparently, there is. I wonder if there's more. No, that's semi-gloss. And the value that got returned here was 22. Oh, actually, got it. Okay. Now I get it. Okay, there we go. So, it is correct, and I was incorrect. All right, good. We're good to go. Okay, so I know that this is now working. See? It's always good. Troubleshooting is never, 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 never a waste of time. Okay, so I don't want to count, I want currency so that they snug up together. It's at the top, it's looking good. Okay, so I guess 13 times 22 is, you can use Excel as a calculator, by the way. Just hit equals 13 times 22. You get 286. So it is indeed 289 for the paint. So this is working correctly. And so now I've got myself a working deal here. Cool. So what are we doing here? Everything looks fine. I'm using formulas in these cases, which I don't necessarily have to, but in this case, I'm using a formula because the labor cost isn't actually broken out anywhere. So I've come in here, I've done my job, I've done my measurements, I've just said, okay, I'm going to give this person this paint. It's going to be that many gallons. We're going to charge 105 for the job. My miscellaneous costs, I'm going to spend like, $50 in brushes and plastic to set down on the floor, and probably a couple of extra accoutrements for things like little cards that allow me to paint right up against trim without actually painting the trim so that I can go quickly, etc. So I'm going to throw that in there, and that's going to be $50. And so if I'm satisfied with this, then the next thing that I want to do is I want to create a button that will run a macro. So my house is 4,400 square feet of paint. Obviously, I'm going to be using different kinds of paint for interior, exterior, and so I didn't want to make this extremely difficult, but in a case where you've got exterior and interior paint, then you would very well want to make your paint choices and separate those by the fact that they are interior or exterior. And then, of course, you would want to run your calculation. This index and match thing would actually have two of those index matches. You can put those in, you can put two of those in there if you like, but you would want to do your index and match to, you could potentially just add the two paints together as far as this particular formula goes because you're just doing an estimate, but you could go in and do an index and match to find the interior paint, and then do an index and match to find the exterior paint and return the price value, and then add those together. So you'd sum those two things. So you'd put a sum outside of the index, and you would separate your index match formulas by a comma, and then you would have your total price per gallon for the interior and exterior, and then you could multiply that by your profit for each one, and then you could multiply it by the number of gallons. And if your profit margin for exterior paint were different, then your index and match function would be a sum of two products, right? So you would find your index match for your interior paint, return that value, multiply it by the profit margin for interior paint, and then sum that to the exterior value exterior value with the profit. And then you could then multiply that by the number of gallons, and you could, so there's lots of ways to solve these problems. You just have to think what's going to be the most simple. And if you're just using this for yourself and you want to have a really accurate tool that avoids human error, you think in terms of being ahead of the game. You could spend a day doing this. You make your paint thing, you get your exterior value in there, and then after a while, you get really good at it, and then you start getting people to hire, and then they want to use this thing. Eventually, if you become a big enough type of painting company, or maybe you add additional services that are related to paint, pressure washing, etc., then you're going to want somebody who isn't you because you're going to be busy. Or maybe you, if you really love doing this stuff like I do, you're going to want to build another tool that will allow you to estimate these jobs properly. And then you're going to decide on the formatting of them. Do I, in fact, want to have this particular layout here, or do I want to have a different letter for so and so? And so the beauty of this particular idea is that you can create this overall, and I know that says 219, and that's fine because it's just rounding that up. You can create this overall aesthetic, and then it's useful because once you save it and protect your formulas so that you can't accidentally delete them, then you can open this up and use it the same way every single time. And so for you, it's okay, enter the customer name, which could be a copy and paste if you need, if it was possible, like from an email or something or whatever. But you just enter that data there, and then you enter all of the potential data here, and you say cool. And then you can even break this farther down and say, this one here says the amount of paint factored by the square footage of the job as a 350 as a gallon. Paint is 350. Or this one is actually a little more confusing than it needs to be, but the amount of paint is factored by the square footage of the job divided by 350 as a gallon of paint covers 350 to 400 feet. The amount of paint required comes to a partial gallon, then the customer is responsible for the whole gallon. Any paint left over belongs to the customer, etc., etc. I could even come in here and say the total number of gallons that you are going to need is, there's all kinds of things you can do on this one. But once that's done, you just need a little, and we're going to do this, like on the other videos you've seen so far. I'm just going to create a slightly darker, slightly lighter, and then I'm going to draw, so I'm going to merge and center that. I'm going to lighten the color, and then I'm going to draw the borders, and I'm going to put a darker line color for the bottom, like so, and like so, and then a lighter color for the upper highlight. Formatting is not my strength, by the way. I just do it with Excel because it's easier for me. Okay, and then in here the word is going to be print. And there you go. I'm gonna make it bold. I'll increase the size on that. I think I'll even change the font color because it's nice to have, add a little bit of flair. And there you go. So now I'm gonna call this button, and this was the naming convention that I was showing you before. So I call that button print. That's my name, and I already have an F11. You get F11 to get there, but I already have this open because I've been doing some coding. And this is the mutual checkbox there. All right, so on my selection change, I want to create some code. This code will ask the Excel that if the first three buttons, or first three letters of the name of the currently active cell is check, so the first three letters, this one is going to do the same thing, except it's going to check for button. And if that is definitely a button, and I'm going to grab the right, actually I'm just going to say, did I call that print? Yeah, I shouldn't call it that. That's okay. If, in that case though, I could just go if active cell, and this is a one-off, so we're going to do it this way, .name is equal to button print. I don't think I'm going to have more buttons on this one anyway. Maybe a clear button, but for now it's just going to be that. So if it's button print, then what I want to do is I want to call, and it's going to be called print me. Okay. And this is the macro that prints. If you want to see what it is, I'll hold on here a second. You can pause it. I created an exact file path with the name of the file name. It's going to pull the name of the file name as the customer name, and that's going to look like, if your customer name is John Smith, it's going to look like this. Whatever you typed into the name for that field, it's going to look, this is the name of that's going to be the name of the file that saves in, and then you okay, I should tell you how to do this. This code is, you can copy and paste it or copy it, but what it's doing is it's creating a range. I made that whole range that's on that sheet that we were just working on called print section, and then I created a file name as a string. The file name is the entire path. So what you would do, the way I did this was I went to the path where I'm saving it, and I clicked in here if you're using Windows, and then I highlighted all of that, copied it, and then I posted it right here. But don't forget to add that extra little backslash, because if you don't, then it won't give you it'll just give you an error, because it'll just, well, actually it won't. It'll go into your documents and it'll call this thing Excel tutorial customer name value. So this tells it to go into the folder Excel tutorial for mine, but you can literally make this any value. You can put that in any folder. Just make sure that you copy that exact path right here. Otherwise, it'll just copy the work. If you save this workbook inside of a folder, then you don't need this exact path because it will save it in the folder that you're working in. But this right here will allow you to actually organize your estimates and keep them in one place. So maybe yours looks like users, your username, and then documents, and then painting estimates or whatever. But that's how you do it. This right here will refer to that range, which I have considered. If you look into, let's go back over here to Excel real quick. I've called this one. Oh, whoops. So I've called this one customer name. So it's going to pull from that named range. Oh, and let's go back to the module. There you go. So and then I added estimate, and then of course the type of file that it is. But this is what's going to tell it to print in a fixed format, and the type is going to be Excel type PDF. And the file name is this file name that we created right here. And then your quality is standard. The document properties will be true. I got this code from online because I don't want to mess with it. But this one you can set to false if you don't want it to open like I was doing a minute ago. It won't open. But I like to keep it true because then I have instant feedback as to whether or not the formula or the function worked in general. So I just take it, do that, and there you go. So when I go back to here, what I want to do, oh, it's not here. I want this window. Because remember, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to activate this guy. And so all I got to do is paste the name of that function in there, hit stop again. That's another important thing. And I should be able to. Oh, you got to end your if, Shane. You know this, don't you? Okay. Clearly you do because you've done it on some other functions. End if you're going to do. I'm not really trying to teach you programming, but if is a conditional statement. There's another conditional statement that's used. It's called a while. And there's a couple of different types. There's a do while, and then there's a while function. And there's a do until in certain languages. Idea is to reach a base case before the function stops, but make sure in any case if you use a loop, a while loop is a while is a loop, but it's also a conditional loop. So make sure if you do any loops that you always are going to reach a base case because you'll have what's called an endless loop otherwise, and you'll have to restart your machine if you try to run it, etc. So anyway, the if statement is basically saying to the computer that if a change of selection or a cell is changed, then I need you to look into this. Without this line of code, you will get an error, so make sure that you include that, because what's going to happen anytime you choose a different cell inside of this worksheet, the main worksheet, then this this function will run, and it's going to look for whatever the current cell that you're in, active cell, that's what that means, and it's going to look for the named range that you gave it, and if it doesn't have one, it's going to throw an error. So this right here will just tell Excel that if you get an error, forget it, just move on. And so it will only really trigger any of these functions if they return true, which is why it's a conditional. And this will gather the name. So once you click on a cell, whatever's in that cell, that is going to be what's populated into this variable right here. And so that variable is a string now, and I can test it, and I can cut it apart and slice it and do other manipulations with it. And in this case, I'm just grabbing the first three characters on the left, and I'm testing those to see if they match a certain pattern I want. Same here. In this case, I'm just, if I were to have several buttons, I would definitely want to uh, name them in a way. And my naming conventions, I think I did on my first video of this tutorial. So if you really want to dig into why that's important, go there and watch those. But this one will just take one button. That's all we're worrying about. And so now if I go back and press that button, oh, there's one other thing I need to do. This is important for me because as a someone who doesn't like to I don't like cumbersome things. If you don't want to click, if you want to print two of these for some weird reason, which once you click the button on print, you'll have to click on another cell and click print again. If you add this little functionality, then every time you click on that print button or a button that works, it will send it on like this. That one actually did not work like I wanted it to. That one is working whether or not a button is checked. So let's see. Let's see what's going on here. Should only be calling print me if that name is button print. And yet that's not what it's doing. Wonder how many of those it did. Hold on. Okay, I had to close this down to see for sure. Alright, I don't have any open now. I go in here, I click here, it freaks out and it prints two. That's interesting. That's because it moved after it printed and then did it again. Okay. So if active cell dot name dot name. Okay, I don't want to do that. I already did the active cell thing. I'm going to do current cell here. Let's see if that solves that problem. Okay, there we go. That's what you want. One thing that you can do when you're using VBA is you can also do this thing, application dot screen. It's really cool that you can do this, by the way. I typed in application and then I typed dot. And when you do that, Excel will pull up this window that you're seeing here. And this is giving you all of the functions that are associated with the object called application. There's various things like active cell, right? Like we showed you here in this other thing with the active cell. That's an object and it has properties to it as well as functions. And the .name is a property. .name itself, I showed this in the other video, it has its own property, and .name is its own property because name has its own properties. So every dot that you do in something like this, you're basically selecting the property or method associated with the object after before the dot. So it's if you click an application and then you hit dot and you get this window and you get another property, let's say value or whatever, or name in this case, you can also hit another dot for any methods that are associated with the name object that are associated with the application object. It's a little bit tricky if you don't know anything about object-oriented programming, but essentially application is an object and it has a bunch of methods and properties associated to it, which if you can believe this or not, are associated to the entire application itself. And so this one is a pretty common one. It's called screen updating uh, equals false. And one thing I've noticed, oddly enough, if you use that, then you should set it to true when it's over. Otherwise, it'll freeze up forever. But that's designed basically to that. And see how that's way smoother than it was a minute ago. And what it's doing is it's when it runs a macro, if you were to record a macro with a lot of lines of code, it would actually show you. I can actually show you. I mean, we're on here, we're doing it, stream of conscious, etc., etc. So if I were to do a macro, I'm just going to record one. It'll be so much easier. All right, so I'm going to come over here to developer. I'm going to hit record macro. I'm going to find a new sheet. Sheet 4, I was going to use that for something else. Okay, so I want to make a macro where I do a list of 5 items. So I'm going to record this macro. I'm going to call it list items. Okay, and then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to go, I want apples. I want oranges, blueberries. I need some blueberries now. I want some Merlot because, after work, I'm going to relax a little bit. And how about carrots? I'm sure everyone loves carrots. All right, stop recording. Now, check this out. So I'm going to go in here, hit macros. I'm going to run list items. I'm going to hit run. So you'll notice it flashed quickly. Oh, yeah, you know what? That was interesting. It flashed very quickly, you'll notice, right? Let's try it again. One more time, just for the people in the back. And you see it flash, you see it actually, you saw it in real time do what I just did. I recorded the macro, it literally replayed it back to me. And so that is what happens whenever you're in a macro, anytime in Excel. Even if you typed it out, it will do what it will pretend like each line was recorded from something you physically did inside the cells instead of coding the macro. So it'll act like that. So if you go in here and you take that screen updating, go to the modules, because all of your recorded macros will end up in your modules. If you go in here and you do this thing where you set this to false, right? And indentation is not necessary, but it makes it more readable. So every indentation usually means that it's hierarchical. So if you had something that was indented, that usually means that it is referencing the thing above it. Okay, so in a case like this now, I've got those in there. The next time I run this macro, it just does it, and you don't actually see. And I know that might have been uh, apples, or like 6 of one, half a dozen the other to you if you weren't paying attention, or maybe the screen refresh rate. But the difference is that was an instantaneous like copy and paste versus a really fast frame by frame of somebody typing it in. The difference is very uh, small, but I will say this: if that particular application did hundreds and hundreds of items, you would absolutely see the difference immediately because it literally will go through every item and do one by one. Whereas setting the screen updating to false will just plop it in there. It'll look like it's plopped in there, but it actually just skips you. It skips all the animation that occurs where it looks like it's doing what it's playing back what you did, but it'll skip all the animations in between. So that's what that does. And I like it because I don't like that weird jerkiness to it where it's like it does a bunch of stuff because that particular function goes to that other sheet, highlights all that stuff, goes to the print section, chooses a PDF option, chooses to print the selection. So it does all these things that are step by step behind the scenes. So if you just do screen updating false, you don't have to see any of it. And then you get this generated here, which can then be printed. You can save it as a Word document. It already is a PDF inside of your. Uh, it's a PDF inside your folder that you chose, and any formatting that you decide to go to put in there. If your painting business has, if you like have a red emblem and that's what you want, then these things will go along. Oops, that's too dark. I'll just make that like white. I'll make it. No, I better not do that for printing. It'd be fine on digital, but when you go to print it out in on paper, you'll want to see it. So it'll look better in black. So if I do that and go back to the sheet, then when you print that out, you will get your formatting. So you can format those cells as you want to make this even nicer. And you can, in fact, insert uh, things into that section. I'm not sure that they will go in there, but if you have a letterhead or something like that on paper, then you can use that. If you have a letterhead on Excel, you can include all that inside here, and it should print out as well. I'm not sure if images will print out, but that's not what this video is about. So that's what using data is for the purposes of all the stuff that I've been talking about. It's been leading up to this sort of thing where you've now got this useful tool for your company, for your business, whatever you do, and you have nice formatting for printing. You've got data that you're pulling from, and now at this point, if you do go in here and change the numbers in here, of course, this is going to function exactly as it did before. It's just going to pull from that data and use the numbers that you put in there. So something like this can be quite useful to somebody who wants to do a product. And if you're going to do, I heard this the other day, I may have said this on my last video, if you're going to do something more than once, you should make a jig. And in this case, if you're going to be running a painting business, you're probably more than likely going to estimate more than one job. So I would say something like this would be quite useful for you. And if it doesn't quite match up, I think a lot of the principles that are in here will help you. I did want to I did want to do one other thing before I let you go on this one. And I might have to do some more tutorials about more formulas, because that's usually formulas and charts. That's what people really like. But I wanted to do something that sort of steps outside of the norm, because like I said on some of my other videos, you can find a tutorial that will tell you what an index match does, or even a find function, the standard deviation function that Excel has. I mean, there's so many. You just start typing a function, you can see scan, search, sex. I don't even know what these do. Sequence, sheet, signs, blah, blah, blah. Look at all this stuff. Sine, you got sine. I imagine that's the sine function for like cosine and all that stuff. Your standard deviation for your population or your sampling. You've got all this standard deviation. Gee, I bet there's a oh, and look, highlighted. Estimate standard deviation based on a sample, including logical values and text. Text and the logical value false have the value 0, and the logical value true has the value 1. So this will tell you, give you some sort of idea. Like if we go sum ifs, if being a conditional, this is going to do add the cells specified by a given set of conditionals or criteria. And if you see sum if and sum ifs, what's the difference? Sum if will allow you to do calculations based on one condition. Some ifs will allow you to do multiple criterias. Sum product sounds exactly like it is. It'll sum the product of corresponding ranges. So in a sense, I could have used that sum product for something like labor, because then it could just be I did something else, but it sums the product of two values, and you would probably, well, let's try it. Why not? Equals sum product, right? So we're going to do sum product, and I want to multiply two values. So I think we're going to do, based on what it says here, array 1 and array 2. Okay, there you go. So it's just comma, comma. So it's basically going to do the math for you. You just got to know summing the product is going to multiply these two values and then add them together. So if I were to say actually, you know what? A better use of that would probably be right here, to sum the product of this and then factor that one too and do that one as well. So if you have two ranges of values that you want to multiply and then add together, or if you have like your value of paint times the number of gallons, and then your labor is times labor rate times hours, this could be the sum product of those two. So you could go sum product over here, this times the value of this number times I wonder if I should just show you. Okay, my throat dried out on me. So I'm going to go sum product. I'm going to do it over here on this sheet because it's fun. This is going to equal the sum product, and the product is going to be my array. My first array is going to be this and this. So I want those to be array 1. And then array 2 would be this times, and then we would go index here, match this, comma, in this range of cells. An exact match, I want number 5, and then I'd want my second one to be, and I'm going to change this to be 1.22. Oops. All right, and then go back over here and make sure this is 1.22. for that purpose anyway. What did it tell me just now? Main index times, oh, times. Okay, never mind. I know what this is for. It's basically to sum the product of comma separated. So it's not. I could. I'd have to do a bit more computing, but it's going to take the value of two or more cell ranges and multiply them together, and then add those products. So if I had three values, like just, let's say I had a situation where I wanted to sum the sales for three of my sales reps out of five, then I would have that. I would use the sum product, and I would sum their the product of their sales times their commission, or whatever it is, sales times their profit, whatever. Anyway, those are the kind of things I use Excel. I don't use all these functions. And if I was going to point out that if you don't know, then you can go to, so that was me getting that code. You can go to, like, let's say I wanted to say Excel formulas, right? Then there are, Microsoft actually does support, this will give you all kinds of different things. So say I want to use Excel as your calculator. It'll tell you how to do it. And then you can come in here, it has videos. It'll show you all this stuff. So if you get stuck on a type of formula that you want, you can come here. Or if you have, okay, I want to know what some product does, type that in, and it'll take you right to that particular job aid. And so then it says the function returns the sum of the products of corresponding ranges or arrays. And then it shows you how to use it. So in this case, it's going to sum the product of B2 to B7. So it's saying from for X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z, and where that equals B10, which is Y. Okay, I see. So it's going to sum the rows Y times M. So what, 40, 62? Yeah. Okay. So it's going to sum the row where, I got it. See, what's doing is you want to say, I want to sum all of the items X that come in size small. Then this one will only give you 45 because it'll take X and the size is S, and there's only one combination of cells that equals that. Whereas Z looks like it has small and large. So you're summing the range of the values of multiple, basically multiple columns, really, or rows rather, and columns. So if I want to say, in this case, let me be more clear. For some product, I want to take the value of a cell based on these two criteria for this row. So in this case, wherever the item ID is Y and the size is M, I want you to return the sum of those two things. And that's what this does. D2 times D7. So it's multiplying D2 times D7. So as you go through this, it'll show you more about how to use the formula. So that's how, whenever I get stuck, that's what I do is I'll go in there and I'll read about it, figure out what the formula actually does and what it refers to, and then I'll use it if needed. Or in a sense, I should go back. If I decide, all right, so what if I want to well, okay, what if I want to create a collection Excel VBA. So a collection, if you don't know, is a unique list, which means if I have a bunch of or let's say I have a bunch of contractors, right? And I have a bunch of products for each contractor, and some of my contractors have multiple products, and I want a list of contractors by name, but because they have multiple products on my sheet, they show up in that list, in that column of vendor name, they show up more than once. So I might have 700 rows of contractors with products, but I might only have 50 different contractors that sell those 700 products. So if I just want a list of only contractors that are unique, then I can use a collection. So how would I do that? So then I just look it up and it'll tell you right here how to do it. So you just go through, boom, and tells you in this case you get the scope of a collection, uh, talks about how to create one, adding to them, using for each, depending on how you want to iterate through them, adding again. So it'll go through all the stuff that you might want to know about that particular function. So I type in kind of what I want to do. Uh, oh, like this. Let's go. Oh, that's my email. I don't want that. Hey, did I get a rejection from somebody? I'm trying to apply for jobs. The job market is woo. Anyway, trying to see if my email showed up on this page. It doesn't. Okay. Then I'm not going to worry too much about it because none of this stuff really. I didn't dox myself or anything, so that's good. All right, anyway. So, okay, so I want to do a unique list of values Excel. And this will give you some ideas on how to do that. There's the unique function. So, what is that? A collection is something you would use in code, by the way, probably not so much in a formula. But the formula version of that would be unique. So as you can see here in this place, if I type in unique and I highlight a column, then it's going to give me only the atomic values of that column. So obviously there's more than one or more than two twos, or more than one two, more than one three, etc. So that'll give you a list of just the unique. So if I just want a list of contractors in a page, then I can create a unique list and I can use that. In fact, you should probably always do something like that when you're looking at some list like this. So obviously, I wouldn't expect the name to be the same in two of these. They should all be unique, but you might run into a situation where they aren't. So you should always just use unique when you're creating a list. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's just another example. And the whole purpose of that was to show you that as you're typing in your formulas, if you want to know what's available, you can type in the first letter and it'll tell you all of the formulas that start with that. This if error function is actually pretty useful. In some cases, well, you've already seen when I'm trying to make these things work, you might see that hashtag val or hashtag ref. That refers to an error. Exactly, right here. Hashtag name. It's like, what? It doesn't like it doesn't know what that is. So it's giving me that error, right? If I was to put my formula in here and it didn't work and it caused an error, then you would get that hashtag reference. And if it's just an absolute like Excel just doesn't know, it's gonna go hashtag error and that's it. Most of the time the error, if it's val error, that means that it's either not able to create an integer value or any kind of number value from your formula. If you're trying to calculate two things and you're accidentally trying to multiply a 2 by a c, it'll give you an error like that for a value error. If it's a reference error, then that usually means that the error itself is related to I can't reference the cell that you're trying to tell me to look in. There's nothing in that. There is no such value. There's no such range. That happens a lot if you're trying to reference named ranges that don't exist. And then there's the name one, and that usually refers to the name of the function. If it doesn't know what the function is, it'll give you a name error. But if it just gives you an error like that, like there's an error in there and you don't know what that is, it could be that it just cannot. It basically means it can't do anything at all. It's not that it was able to look up and find out that there was no reference. It just wasn't able to look it up at all. Like the difference between your battery is dead and your battery needs to charge. It's like you can tell the difference. One is you're not going to get started at all, and the other one is, oh, okay, there's some sort of indicator that this is probably the battery or whatever. When your car starts to slowly crank, you don't know what the problem is, but you can probably determine that it could be the battery. And that's how these errors work. Some of them give you an indication, others you turn it on. Just because your car doesn't turn over at all when you hit the battery doesn't necessarily mean the battery's dead. It could be a variety of things. Your cable's unplugged, could be any number of reasons, right? So if you don't know, then that's a lot more troubleshooting than if you do know. So Excel tries to help you out a little bit with those little errors. All right. So wrapping up, we did the painting calculator. I just wanted to go through a concept with you that I was kind of talking about earlier. And as I said it, I thought maybe I'll show you because you probably figured it out, but just in case you didn't, if you're going to take your interior paint and your exterior paint and you're going to change their profit margin, right? So I go exterior profit, let's say. And because exterior paint, let's just say it's oil based. So for example, the price of oil goes up, water-based paint stays the same, but oil-based paint changes. And that's true. It's oftentimes the water-based and the solvent-based are different prices because of prices of oil and so on. So maybe you want to make a profit of 1.3% on exterior paint and 0.122 on interior paint. So if you're going to do that, you still have the 13 gallons that you're going to buy, right? Let's say, because you got to cover 4,400 square feet in this example. We would do this a different way if we were actually going to do this, but for now, I'm doing 444 square feet. So the first thing I obviously want to do is I want to get my data and find my data. So I don't want to do that. All right, fine. Right now, instead of using the Sherwin sheet reference, it's using the table reference because I made a table of this data. So that's what this is. That's what the table. It's called table 001, and page means it's the pretty much the one page of a table. Okay, but it works the same way. And so then I want to match, and of course I want to match that. The row number is that for my interior paint, right? So this is my interior formula. So I want to match, just make sure I get that okay. Match that. I want it to be, I want that to be found within this column, in which case the brackets indicate product. So that's the array of that column is called product. Obviously, that's the table header. And I want that to be an exact match. So there's my exact match. And of course, I want 5. Okay. And so if we were to match that, we know 18, 17. But I also want to multiply that number, right, by my profit for interior paint, which is this. And I want that to be, oh, and this is an example of why you would want to do 1.22, because this right here indicates that the value is 3.9974, when in reality, what we want is the value of the price of the cost of the paint plus 22%, and that's what that is. Times 1 means times 18, and then times 0.22 means add that $3 to it. So we should see, we'll go back to here, now we see 22. Okay, so that right there is for my interior paint, right? I also want to multiply that. So I'm going to come in here and multiply that by 12. Well, not 12. I want it to be this number, whatever this happens to be. So now I've got that number, right? And that's my interior. So I could do on another sheet somewhere, I could add these two together by basically copying this over, right? But in this case, I would be using this because it's not using absolute reference. It's not on the right one. See, that's what happens when you don't use absolute referencing. And then I'm matching this value, okay? And what else am I missing? Table on page 1. Oh, because this also moved over one column. I'll tell you. Okay, so now that my references are good, I've got, obviously, you can then go like some. So Excel's really super smart. See what it did there? I just hit sum. I hit this button. I hit sum, and then I let it do the work, and it realized that I wanted to sum these two. So I can do it that way, or I can go in here, and I can highlight my index like this. Boom. Okay, escape. Come in here. And I need one. Wait, what happened? All right, I'm gonna undo what I just did. So, okay, gotcha. All right, I need a parenthesis. Or maybe I just get rid of that and that. We found a typo. Correct it to some. Oh, wait, no, that's right. Index table, page product, cost profit, data B2, main, AJ15, D3. Oh, I see. Yeah. No, I don't want that. What you want to do, of course, is these are two separate values, not a range. Okay, there we go. Right, comma, not colon. Okay, so this one, and then and this actually might, if you did it this way in your daily life, it might make it easier for you. I don't know, but if you see what I'm doing, I'm taking the cell reference that I was referencing in this sum, and I'm just changing it to be my formula. Let's see what happened there. So I want that to, all right, this is why I pull this down. Okay, so I want that to then index that product cost profit data times, okay, trick that you can pull. Oh, I see what's probably happening. Since I started that first one with a parenthesis, let me get rid of that parenthesis. I'll get rid of that parenthesis. Boom, 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 boom. And then times cost profit. That was that one. When the first character is an equal or minus, Excel thinks it's a formula. Doi. What did I do wrong? Sorry, I'm just trying to troubleshoot this here. So that's where that match ends. Okay, that's where that ends. And that's where the index ends. feel like I'm missing a parenthesis somewhere. Okay, I'm gonna get out of here. Cancel that. You know what I think I need to do? I need to take, I don't know if I actually copied the right formula, but I'm gonna take, I see what's up. Okay, so I don't need this because, all right, now I took out the parentheses because they were kind of confusing. I left the, oops, that's why you hit escape whenever you want to get out of something like that. And then in place of D3, we'll get rid of that equal sign. That should cover me. There we go. So this essentially now is the sum of two lookups. But each of these calculations has created its own profit margin for exterior versus interior. So you can see if I wanted to then sum another total, I can include labor into that, and then I would get my estimate. So I could use this in my final estimate for the total cost. And as a matter of fact, I made labor rate times, labor rate is the rate of labor, and then this is the number of hours. So I could then sum, I could just include that sum, 2275, 2255. And the last thing I'd want to sum in this large formula would be what? My miscellaneous charges. So everything is comma separated. 22, 2325. What do we have over here? 2255. Those are not the same. AQ13. Yeah. So this is, oh, right. They're not going to be the same. The reason they're not going to be the same is because the exterior paint costs a different amount. But if I were to use this formula right here, just copy and paste this daddy, boom, Control C, sheet, escape, or else it'll try to add that to your formula. And then, you know what? I want to round up to 0, so I'm going to put that whole thing right here. And I didn't like it because why? Because, wait for it. You know what? I'll do it like this. Is that why I didn't like it? Because I tried to keep the equal sign in there? Probably. There we go. Cool. Now I've got the total that I want. So this one will give us a paint estimate for, and of course I'd have to fix this value too. So in that case, I would just probably at all what I want times 8. Yeah, I'm trying to get a real profit there. Okay, cool. So there is my paint estimator. And if I change this square footage, it changes there too. And so that's how you use data in conjunction with my useful formatting tips to make something that looks like this. Now, I know, yeah, you might just be fine with the way Excel normally looks. I get it. But this is going to give you so much control over what you're creating because you could make it look like this, and you could create fields over here on this sheet. You could be like, yeah, here's my interior profit, my exterior profit, and it works. I mean, who's going to stop you? It works. Isn't that really what you need? It needs to work. I think the one reason why you would use Excel, and here's where I'm going to preach about Excel. So you can skip this if you don't want to, if you already know why. But if you want to do something in Excel, or actually, let me back up. I want to give you an example. I used to process rebates at Puget Sound Energy in Washington State, and there was this one group of rebates that came through. It was for the Starbucks Corporation, and I was processing lighting rebates. And what that means is Starbucks has a lot of locations, as you know. Sometimes they seem to compete with each other or whatever. And so they submitted a ton of these rebates because they had gone out and bought lamps, light bulbs for their places and in their lobbies and all that, and they replaced their entire lighting setup from their old CFLs to LEDs, and they would get different um, values for each, but each area had a different tax rate. And so our rebate actually paid 100% of the cost of the lamp up to the rebate amount, including tax if it didn't exceed it. So if you bought a lamp for $20 and the rebate was $20, you would get a rebate for $20, but you might pay $21.72 because of tax. But if the rebate was for $20 and after tax you paid $19.78, we would pay you $19.78, but you wouldn't get to $20. So I processed about 80 of these things, and a good third of them came back because they needed to be prorated because the tax rates were lower in some places and they paid less for the lamps. And so after about 30% of those came back, I made a tool like this and that calculated things correctly. All I had to do was enter data from the receipts that were provided and it spat out the correct numbers, and I never had another one back. So if you're using Excel and you need something that's accurate that keeps things the same and never you have to worry about them changing, that's why we do this. So there you go. Hope you found it useful, and if so, like, subscribe, or whatever. I will make more of these. You can also submit special requests, and I will do my best to accommodate you. Thank you.